З-під вражої охрани втікли два отамани, зірвалися соколики на волю. Поблизу гуляй поля в болотах зупинились, у хаті біля старої верби.
It's too early to start worrying. You shouldn't worry. You should keep calm. Assess the situation. Watch over each other so you don't get fucked up.
I'm in the Donetsk region, near the embattled city of Toretsk, embedded with the Ukrainian 59th Mechanized Brigades Shkval Battalion. Shkval battalions are penal units gathered from the Ukrainian prison system that started to pop up late last year. Recruits marching out of the penal system onto the battlefield have been most associated with Russian prison recruitment, like the notorious Wagner Group, which used its criminal element as assault groups in the over half-year slog and slugfest that was the battle for Bakhmut.
Their motivation is simple. If you don't push forward, you get killed, in front of others too. They'll brutally torture and beat you to death, but if you break through, you may be lucky enough to survive.
Bakhmut was hell, both for those facing the unrelenting avalanche of bodies crashing into the burnt-out ruins they're tasked with clutching onto, or the bodies themselves, sent into a brutalist labyrinth to find whatever crack or hole to burrow into for what remains of the buildings if they mean to survive. If you did manage it, often the only reward to look forward to surviving is the opportunity to do it all over again. Regular reports of mistreatment, particularly harsh for those who objected to going into the concrete jungle, ill-prepared with steep odds, as well as the infamous sledgehammer executions of those under their command, inspired a culture of fear to keep the men advancing. The nature of how prisoner soldiers were used in the battle and others, and their status in the Russian armed forces, means that any progress made was paid disproportionately in the blood of inmates. Their eyes were heavy with the weight of their task as they loaded their rifles, bullets clinking into the magazine. These men are preparing to head to the front line, or more specifically, the line of contact with the enemy. To hold the front, it is necessary to have a constant flow of manpower to and from the frontline defenses, to man the trenches under fire in frequent infantry assaults. Without the rotation of fresh troops to replace those dug in on the contact line, exhaustion and continued casualties will wither away a unit until it dissolves under enemy pressure that can at times be relentless. Not only at the front itself, where Russian munitions have a tendency to make themselves known at every waking moment, but also en route to their positions, where Russian drones hunt for any movement. A real and present threat for these men preparing to load into an unarmed pickup truck and head to one of the most active parts of the front line.
We just have to get into that dugout. The rest is just... It's important to get entrenched. And if things really turn to shit, we're running the fuck away. As long as we don't get hit with cabs. We've got cabs there. If a cab hits us directly, that's it. Even if it isn't a direct hit, it's not going to be pleasant. Have you seen a cab strike before? Have you ever seen a cab? Not yet. We need to ask them whether we can hear it first. You can't. Plane flies at speed, launches the fucking thing, and they guided it.
How long have you guys been working out here?
We're staying there for 3 days, and then we'll see.
3 days and then so he hasn't fought here yet?
On this axis, yes.
Has anybody given you any advice about it? What to expect?
We're always expecting the enemy. We're ready to push them back.
The commanding officer showed the men his iPad, giving instructions about their mission objective as they tried to absorb any information that might help protect them.
Look, boys, this is what you'll be doing. Position is here. You'll be dropped off here. Somewhere around here. It's around 1.1 kilometers away from Kyiv. Boys are positioned 100 to 120 meters from Kyiv. They're dug in there. Preferably, you'll rotate with them quietly, don't get spotted by drones or thermal vision. Run in and take whatever you need from them. They have a power bank, take it. Ammo, magazines and grenades. They'll leave. We'll give you thermal goggles now. You also have your own power banks. We only have one. If you don't charge your phones, you'll have enough for the thermal. The boys there also have a power bank. You'll take it from them. The main point is, nobody knows our people are there. They don't know our people are there. They're hitting Kyiv. There's been drone drops today, but they haven't targeted our boys, because they're staying quiet and not peeking out. They're only digging in and reinforcing their position. That's what you have to do too. Dig in and reinforce. They'll rest for a day. Then they'll push forward. They'll end up somewhere around here. None have been spotted here. No movement, rather. It's obvious there are dugouts and trenches there, but there's no one there. You saw what the tree line looks like on the video feed. It's sparse. You can easily spot them if they try to push from there, but also be keeping an eye on you around the clock. Carousel will be constantly keeping an eye on you. Don't do anything stupid. Don't reveal your position, just dig in. There should be someone keeping watch around the clock. In other words, one of you sleeps, one digs, and the other keeps watch, and you rotate. You decide among yourselves how many hours you rest, and how many hours you dig and keep watch. Clear?
Before the men can be briefed, the unit must prepare if they wish to survive, let alone succeed in their mission. This means conducting reconnaissance, evaluating the men and firepower needed, assigning roles, mapping a route of approach, planning for evacuation, preparing covering fire, and organizing externalities that could bring their deployment to an unscheduled end.
The backpack is so fucking heavy. Who took how many rounds with them? Is that all you had with you? There's still a bit more. Do you have 300 extra rounds? Of course, fucking A.
Those chosen for the front prepared their gear. Magazines filled to the brim with 5.45 AK-74 rounds, body armor, power banks, and bags filled with whatever was needed to keep them alive for the next few days. They gathered smoke grenades as well as M67 baseball grenades for an explosive last resort when swarmed. Instructions are given on how not to lose each other in the dark, even if it means holding on to each other in the inky blackness. A thermal optic is given to the crew to assist them in spotting life in the ocean of this pitch black. To not stand out and shine bright in the blanket of darkness, tape is put over the tail and headlights of the pickup truck turned into an impromptu infantry transport vehicle. The last order of business is planning for the worst, the evacuation of casualties. This would be carried out by a separate battalion, which the commanding officer did his best to assure those being sent out with the job of turning sandbags and tree lines into steel for the next 3 days.
Everyone locked and loaded? Look, the 9th Battalion is responsible for evacuations. My oh my, how come? No, listen boys, to avoid dragging in more of our boys and putting them at risk, evacuations are handled by the 9th Battalion, in case someone's wounded and we have to jump in to evacuate them. They can land right up near your position. I agree, our people can. Should the need arise, they can fly in and evacuate the wounded. God forbid that happens, of course. Everything is clear, because these boys haven't exposed their position. The Kyiv position was exposed and they got fucking hit. They started shelling their sandbags. What needs to be done while it's still green out, before winter has fucking set in? Use green branches. Is the dugout reinforced with boards? No, look. Reinforce your position with as many sandbags as possible. Camouflage the sandbags with fucking twigs. And what other shit you can find. Use it to camouflage the sandbags. And don't fucking stick out of the tree line, because a drone will spot you with its thermal optics. Immortals. One of you sleeps, one digs, and one keeps watch. Minimize your movement. Don't use the radio too often. Report in every hour. Do you understand?
Then they jumped in the back of the pickup truck bound for the contact line and went off into the darkness. They will have to hold their position on the front for 72 hours before relief will be offered.
I'm begging you, don't get spotted. If you're spotted, you're done for.
Once the sun has set 3 times, those who survived evacuate, and those who didn't are retrieved, as happens on thousands of contact points like this one along the front line. Lieutenant Colonel Baluk used to be in charge of the 11th Separate Motorized Infantry Battalion, under the 59th Mechanized Brigade, which saw action in the Kherson and Donetsk regions. He asserts they had very high-quality equipment and personnel before it took heavy losses in the Donetsk region over time, particularly in the settlement of Avdiivsky, where defenders fought to defend each basement as the Russians unleashed a full-scale assault in mid-October of 2023. The lieutenant recalls attacks as frequent as 3 to 4 times a day by waves of armored columns and Euro trucks. The withdrawal of artillery support due to Russian encroachment and the lack of manpower to hold the trenches would lead to further significant losses for the 11th. The fallout led to the commander being removed and reassigned.
The battalion was wiped out, so to speak. Some were wounded, and others, may they rest in, died. May they serve eternally. Others couldn't bear it any longer and went AWOL. The battalion was completely restaffed with conscripts who were poorly motivated, untrained, ill-equipped, and not physically fit. And so the battalion's structure gradually degraded, so to speak. During that time, the 11th Battalion never recovered. In other words, the battalion was deployed until it was completely wiped out. I was then put in charge of the Shkval Battalion.
How did this battalion come into creation? How was it formed?
It was formed on order of the President, the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. It's made up of people who committed crimes and were serving their sentences. They expressed a desire to protect their country.
What did you expect commanding former prisoners versus civilians who went into military service? Did you have any expectations?
The difference was in tasks. The tasks come in very quickly, and they have to be performed very quickly. There's no time to prepare. There's only time for basic planning and for carrying out the tasks. In other words, the battalion plays the role of firemen, so to speak. They work in the toughest parts of the front line. Special tasks, as in either recapturing positions or conducting assaults, or destroying enemy positions by throwing explosives into their dugouts, and so on. Raids, assaults, battle reconnaissance. Honestly, Shkval Battalion is a much more interesting assignment. It's a much more dynamic task. I like it. Yes, it was different from commanding a regular battalion of conscripts, because the personnel here are much more motivated, much better prepared for living in rough conditions. They're used to surviving, and that shows when they fight. 90% of the people I've spoken to in my battalion wanted to serve in 2022. Many people lost family members. Many people lost their homes in occupied territories. This is what we call, among ourselves, our state's golden reserve of motivated fighters. They were reserved and given to us. They're much braver than regular conscripts. In most cases, I'm not talking about everyone. Psychologically speaking, fear of punishment stops most people from committing a crime. These people can overcome their fears. A lot of the most recent non-prisoner conscripts, the people that are pulled off public transport, unfortunately, it was a failed mobilization. There are a lot of awesome motivated fighters, but unfortunately, they are dying en masse.
Not all convicts are eligible for service. To be eligible for service in a Shkval battalion like this one, they can't have been convicted of 2 or more murders and or manslaughter charges, rape, corruption, as well as crimes against national security. If this is not an issue for you in your case, then you may volunteer in exchange for a military contract that, when completed, allows you to walk away from service a free man, creating a both national and private battle for freedom and the trenches held by convicted men.
Are there any restrictions on the soldiers in this battalion versus soldiers in other battalions that are not made up of former convicts?
They've signed a special contract that has two stipulations. They're not allowed to go on leave. They're not permitted to go on leave for treatment if they're wounded. They're treated here at base, camp, or on the battlefield.
Shkval penal battalions, translating roughly to powerful gust of wind, are spread across the Ukrainian Armed Forces. This means they are serving on a variety of front lines under a plethora of different commanders with different mentalities, making it very difficult to characterize the quality of command or of service for the rank and file outside of a case-by-case basis. Pay can go from $500 to $4,000 a month, contingent on length of time spent on the front. Probably the biggest difference between regular service contracts and the one with convicted battalions is that once you sign up with Shkval, you're with them until the war, or yourself, meets an end, assuming you aren't otherwise wounded. With the end of the war still not in sight, this could mean staying in uniform on the worst part of the front for months, years, or however long the cannons are firing.
Was there any concerns about behavior of former prisoners in the military from command when they were talking to you about taking this position as commander? If someone is a former prisoner, well, will they do crime in the army? If they do crime, do you get in prison? The conduct.
Yes, that has happened. However, surprisingly, they form a certain sense of camaraderie. They push each other not to commit any crimes. How? In various ways. In some places it's effective, in others not so much. Some fall back to their criminal ways. They get punished and are put back in prison with a longer sentence.
You said that the missions they're on now are more interesting. What makes those missions interesting? Are they in the most difficult parts of the front compared to other units?
Destroying the enemy is always a cool and interesting task. And there's room for maneuvering. I get to choose how to destroy the enemy. I'm not constrained like in other defensive battalions. We can fly in and destroy any enemy armor. We can fly in and destroy any enemy armor. We've destroyed occupied buildings this way. Our armored transport would drive up to a building occupied by the enemy. My soldiers would run out, and from behind cover, they would throw 30 kilograms of plastic explosives through the window and drive away. And in 360 seconds, nothing of the enemy in the building would be left. These are interesting and cool tasks, and truly there are fewer casualties than just defending. I show you video in our Telegram chat. More enemy losses and fewer casualties.
More enemy losses and less ours.
Bodies hit them, let the bodies hit them.
A very effective tactic for destroying the enemy.
Very effective tactic of destroying the enemy.
But the enemy also learned to do this.
But now enemy also learned this tactic.
First of all, we work in small groups. Everything is very mobile and moves very quickly. The enemy doesn't have time to inflict heavy losses. Everything is being monitored and heavy equipment is used. When we're on the assault, we jump out on top of the enemy. Wagner didn't operate like this at all. Their motivation system differs completely from ours. Our people are fighting for their country and homes. They didn't just receive a draft summons. They came here to protect their country, and in most cases they know that. We operate 4 kilometers from the front line. We could have an RPG injury or something else, but our guys know what it's like to go on the assault. And they know if something happens, they could also go on the assault. They carefully climb out of the BMP, put on their gear and go help the boys. He'll drive to where he's needed, and he'll destroy the enemy where it's needed. I had an incident where a BMP's turret jammed. It couldn't turn. They were 300 meters away from the enemy's position. He turned the BMP around so the gunner could take a shot. Then he climbed out of the vehicle, nailed the enemy with an RPG, climbed back in and drove away.
Soldiers in the Shkval Battalion received 21 days of basic training, a short period to learn how to endure the worst the Donetsk region has to offer. Lieutenant Baluk says that this brief window to drill battlefield survival skills into their heads is followed up with what essentially amounts to learning on the job. To pick up anything they missed or didn't have enough time to learn, recruits must train between missions, putting them through a trial by fire as they have to learn under the buzz of Mavics in the field. Under different circumstances, without an incredibly urgent manpower crisis, maybe they would have had more time for basic. Then again, under different circumstances, they probably wouldn't have had recruited prisoners at all. The manpower issue was no more clear than during the battle and retreat from Solydove, as the units left in the city faced encirclement.
This unit served in Solydove, yeah?
Yes, we were at the Kotla-Yarevskia mine. We held this mine. 6 of my soldiers held the mine against a naval infantry battalion. 6 of my soldiers held the mine. A lot of enemy forces were destroyed. It's all confirmed, they have footage and documents. They had to retreat because they were completely surrounded. They broke encirclement and escaped.
They were surrounded but escaped. Can you talk about how they escaped?
They escaped through the underground tunnels. They emerged from Mykolaiv settlement. On the way, they eliminated around 11 enemy soldiers. They assaulted dugouts where the enemy was resting. It had been our dugout from which the assault of Mykolaiv had started. They entered the dugout thinking our forces were still there, because contact had been lost. They understood that these were enemy forces and eliminated them. They cleared out another dugout on the way. Then they reached a railroad bridge, where they were picked up by our forces, by the 15th National Guard Brigade. Simply put, we're fucking losing territory. Because of a lack of communication. Because of a lack of initiative. Because of a lack of artillery support, because of a lack of drones, because of a lack of trained commanders. Unprepared brigades are being deployed at the most difficult parts of the front where they're just crumbling, even though there's parity with the enemy in terms of personnel numbers. We haven't seen any terrifying enemy waves. We were conducting an assault around 2 weeks ago. We were holding a position near the road. There were 4 people. We had 70 confirmed kills in 24 hours. They were running towards that position to capture it. They sacrificed 70 people for it. That's the only time I saw more of them than us. As for the rest, due to a lack of basic communication and artillery support, the soldiers sitting in trenches don't know what's going on. If a position to the left or right of them fell, they become surrounded and are forced to retreat. How did we retreat from Selydove? We didn't retreat because of our urban fighting. We retreated from Selydove because they cut off logistics, because neighbouring positions weren't held hard enough. Like the positions in the middle. So they either have to die or retreat.
How would you define these communication problems? Is it that, the infrastructure isn't there, it's just the units are not making the effort to communicate, a problem with poor command? What's this communication problem?
They're not bad commanders, they're completely untrained. They're conscripted and have no idea what's going on.
What type of mistakes does a commander make when he doesn't understand what's going on and he's not learned?
Untimely deployment of reserve forces into battle. Battalion commanders lack reserve forces. No one's thinking about this. Loss of communication with subordinates during battle. Orders are not issued in time. No timely support. Or a complete lack of timely support for entrenched infantry. When you send infantry into a trench, you have to think 10 times over on how to support them and provide cover. There's none of that.
I know that there's been reports of Ukrainians testing the Russians with words they can't say. you know, in the Ukrainian language. Have soldiers in this unit ever used their knowledge of the Russian language against the Russians and the Russian lack of knowledge of the Ukrainian language against them?
Yes, of course. Of course they use them, these methods work. We captured a lot of POWs. We capture 3 to 4 POWs every mission.
Got you. So they just say, yeah, come over here, we're with you, and then...
Situations differ, but this also works as a way to fool the enemy. These moments only happen in chaotic situations. For example, in urban warfare, when you don't know where the enemy is exactly, the enemy is constantly moving, and we don't have enough forces to hold all the buildings and thoroughfares. So the enemy makes it through. In such cases, it's possible to negotiate, to capture POWs and fool the enemy. We've captured a lot of POWs. Most recently, we've captured 4 POWs. 4 people. Their senior tried to throw a grenade. He pretended to surrender. He held a grenade in his hand. The boys saw it. They'd liquidated him. He fell back into the dugout where the rest of his team were. He dropped the grenade and was torn to shreds. We captured 4 POWs. Were they wounded? Yes, wounded. But that would have happened anyway, because their senior decided to swing a grenade around.
What support does your battalion need more of?
My battalion requires adequate anti-drone equipment. That's it. Then we could effectively... All of my losses were not caused by direct combat. All of my losses were caused by FPVs and drones. In direct combat, we suppress the enemy so effectively they don't have time to reload. But jamming equipment doesn't always work against FPVs.
What's the best part of the job?
Seeing the soldiers accomplish the mission and come back safe and sound. It's like New Year's and a birthday at the same time.
What's the worst part of the job?
Losing men. The worst thing is when you can't extract them. My name is Roma. I joined on May 30th, 2024. What is your role? To go on assaults. Assault infantry.
Roma is a 20-year-old convict who has signed a contract with the Ministry of Defense in exchange for the commutation of his prison sentence.
How were you recruited into the armed forces?
I signed a contract with the Special Committee of Prison.
What was your expectation when you joined the armed forces?
Well, Don, I didn't expect the drones. I thought we were going to storm houses. That would be clearing out houses. And tree lines too. I thought we were only going to be clearing out houses. But I also like clearing out tree lines.
Equipped with a Kalashnikov, a sack of grenades, and a disposable single-use shoulder-mounted anti-tank system, men like Roma are sent into some of the most violent parts of the Donetsk front line to capture enemy positions and reinforce the holes in the ground command cannot afford to lose.
What was your first mission like?
My first assignment? We had to take a tree line. I was in the evac group. In case the boys needed to retreat, and in case anyone was wounded, we would go and evacuate them to a safe zone. Thank God no one was wounded on my first mission. We captured the position, we dug in, and everyone made it back safe and sound.
What are the type of missions that this unit sends you on?
Different kinds. We dug trenches, we held positions and assaulted others. We transported men to their positions. It varied.
Despite being in the military for only half a year, Roma has been wounded on 3 occasions, and recently been promoted to the rank of Sergeant Major in a mechanized company, putting him in charge of armored vehicles on the front after seeing enough action with the Shkval Battalion to give a lesser soldier his fill.
How would you describe the fighting on this part of the front?
How to describe it? It's brutal. When you pull out your brother in arms and they're missing half their body or their head. I brought back the bodies of 2 of my brothers in arms. They were missing their heads. It was terrifying. It's terrifying when you knew them and you spent time with them. and bringing them back in such a state. It's very brutal. My first injury was caused by shrapnel to the head. We were holding a tree line, we were repelling assaults, we were hit with a mortar, and I suffered shrapnel injuries. The second time was a light concussion. Our vehicle was hit. We made it out with only light concussions. The third time our position was hit, I was closing the back door of the armoured vehicle, a mortar shell landed behind us, and I was hit with ricocheting shrapnel. They were on a mission in a Kirpi, Emre. The back door was open, and it closes very slowly. They couldn't close it in time. They were getting shelled by mortars and got hit.
How would you describe your treatment in the unit?
I'm treated superbly well. If we're getting bombed and we need support, we just radio in the coordinates and they return fire. They listen to us. Command is excellent.
Roma has entered the war at a particularly perilous period, even though it's always been that way. Russian drones now number in the millions, and their pilots have gained more experience after years of frontline action.
When commanding armored vehicles, what are the biggest threats that you guys face?
The biggest danger is when the engine is hit with a bullet or a FPV, and the vehicle stalls. You have to bail out and run for cover. That's the biggest danger.
One of the main issues offered by those who have gotten caught up in the overwhelming attacks in eastern Ukraine is a lack of properly prepared defenses in advance of the Ukrainian withdrawals as Russians crawl forward. After the fall of certain fortress cities, it's common to hear stories of soldiers needing to hastily prepare defenses for themselves, taking manpower away to dig trenches as deep and strong entrenchments were not prepared in advance of their deployment. Kyiv says that they are working on improving them, making agreements with Ukrainian contractors, but more excavators, engineering equipment, and manpower is still needed.
What are the quality of the Ukrainian defenses on this front of the line, the trenches and entrenchments?
Ours are ready, others aren't. But they're under heavy attack.
How would you describe the enemy that you faced on this part of the front? Are they competent? Are they skilled? Or are they not well trained? How are they used?
It varies from position to position. We advanced on one position where the enemy was quite weak. On other positions, the enemy was stronger. And there's a big difference between the Povrovsk axis and here. There were much more enemy forces there, and they were much better prepared. The enemy is more active there. The enemy has more soldiers and artillery in Povrovsk. We were transporting people there. We were shelled intensively. We were evacuating people before they were killed. If they had stayed even 30 minutes too long, they would have been taken out by the artillery. Not only were they being shelled from both sides, the enemy hadn't been spotted. I don't know where they were coming from. Enemy drones spotted the position. The enemy was only visible on one side, but our forces were being shelled by artillery from two sides. We had to go back to extract our people. There weren't as many enemy soldiers at the place we had been deployed before that. Only mortars and drones. But at Povrovsk, there were enemy troops, drones, mortars, and armor.
What does a Russian assault typically look like on this part of the front? How does the typical Russian assault go?
When we take a position, we may get counterattacked. They throw in small groups of soldiers to see what kind of weapons we have, to determine where our machine guns, AGS-17s, and mortars are positioned. Then they suppress these positions, then they start moving forward to push us back. So repeated small group attacks. When they find a weak point, they suppress it with fire. Drones, FPVs, drone drops, they use it all quite
Due to
intensively.
Shkval's status, contracts, and the nature of their role in the armed forces, in his short service, Roma has seen some of the worst fighting 2024 had in store for the Donetsk region, as the fall of the fortress city of Avdiivka set up a series of events that led to a series of retreats that only slowed at the gates of Povrovsk.
We were in position near Selydove. Selydove used to be a very cool city.
What was the fighting around there like?
The artillery fire was very intense there, and enemy troops were trying to advance.
What were the size of the Russian assault groups?
There were small attack groups from several sides. They attacked from there, there, and there. They regroup and then push forward. They try to find places to group up. They push forward in small groups, fortify their positions, and then push farther in. At our most recent deployment, 2 soldiers were scouting out positions. Our soldiers? No, they entered our position. They wanted to see how we would react, so they could determine our position because they didn't know where we were. There were 5 fortified positions there. They wanted to determine which position we were holding in order to bomb it. They sent out 2 or 3 people. We gunned them down, they saw from where, and they just started bombing. So even stuff like that happens. We were holding a position near Mykolaiv. We were shelled with mortars first. Then enemy troops attacked, we took them out. After a 5-minute smoke break, they started shelling us with mortars again, and then enemy troops attacked again.
Has it been hard adjusting to military life from prison life?
No, it's kind of the same. Only that in prison, people live in families just like here. People help each other out, just like here. It's just different circumstances. The difference is there's less freedom there. There's more freedom here. Here you feel responsible not only for yourself, but also the person beside you.
What is the best part of your job?
Assaults. When we take back a position, when we push back the enemy.
What's the worst part of your job?
When they take it, lost positions, back and kill our people. It's bad, but I hope we'll take it back.
These men are in one of the most difficult positions in the Ukrainian military, and certainly have one of the most hardline service contracts of all those in uniform due to the circumstances behind their origins. Marching out of the correction systems to clutch onto a rifle with the promise that when the war is over, you will be rewarded with both freedom from prison bars and social redemption through your service to your nation. But you must make it to the end of the war, whenever that will be, in order to cash in on your agreement for your new life outside of a cell or a muddy trench. I wonder how many of these men really desired service, as Baluk said, and would have signed up if it wasn't for their jailhouse blues. No matter the path they have taken to wearing the pixel camo the Ukrainians have become known for, men convicted of crimes ranging from theft, assault, or any number of other convictions are setting up sandbags together in order to fight for both personal and national freedom.
What's something you wish civilians understood about the military and service in the military that they don't?
I think they need to pay more attention to what's really going on. Because at this rate of losses, we can lose our sovereignty. And if we don't pay attention to this now, if we don't unite now and communicate with each other, to work towards victory, rather than thinking about yourself and your own amusement, then we'll save our sovereignty and our country. We'll build a cool country like the one we need. We need to unite this instant. We need to work towards victory right this instant. I want to thank America for their support. That's it. You don't owe us anything, but you're still supporting us, and for that we thank you. We need more, but it is what it is. We also understand that you have your own interests. Plan after the war? Hopefully, go back to my family and forget about this whole war. Glory to Ukraine. We will stand strong. Shkval is the best.
Thank you for watching this independently made documentary. I hope this first-hand testimony of the war in Ukraine helps you better understand those caught in the violent throes of history. We have a bunch of other videos interviewing those affected by the war on the ground in Ukraine that you can check out on my channel. If you want to help fund more of my work so I can do more documentaries like this in the future, please support me on DylanBurnsTV on Patreon or my second YouTube page called Dylan Burns Live, where you can see my videos and live streams, which you can view on my Twitch or my website, DylanBurns.tv, every weekday from 6 p.m. EST to midnight. If you want my hot takes or photos from my time in Ukraine, check out my socials, including DylanBurns1776 on Twitter, DylanBurnsTV on Blue Sky, or DylanBurnsTV on Instagram. All links, including the community Discord, are in the description. See you guys next time. Good night and good luck.